Welcome to Resonate Again, where I, Phil Stokes, get to interview leaders from all walks of life about their reflections on mission and discipleship in a fast-changing culture, asking the question, what is resonating for them in this cultural moment? The word resonate has many meanings. It evokes images, memories, and emotions. It's a relationship with something or someone with a deep reverberating meaning. So I'm looking for those connection points, those aha moments that people are experiencing. This year, under the Reach London banner, I've been hosting a series of workshops in a local cafe, exploring the fivefold ministries of Ephesians 4, often referred to with the acronym APEST, Apostle, Prophet, Evangelist, Shepherd, and Teacher. And I was asking folk who I could interview as an evangelist, and two separate people in a week mentioned Nathaniel's name. You should chat to Nathaniel Moody if you want to talk to an evangelist. So here we are. Welcome, Nathaniel.
A very good morning to you, Phil. And yeah, it's great to be with you guys this morning.
I'll give you a little bit of background for our listeners. You're a minister at Albany Park Baptist Church. Is that right? Since July?
I am, yes. This is my first ever pastorate role. I think, in the last 26 years, Phil, I've had probably most jobs within a church, but never running one. So this is an interesting baptism of fire.
Well, I want to get into that in a moment, but you're also a fitness fan and a pioneer of fitness and emotional well-being and addiction recovery course. And you're a qualified fitness coach and addiction recovery facilitator and a mentor. Yeah,
that's correct.
A national speaker, I'm given to understand, and you've been in almost every kind of ministry across many denominations over 25 years. And after struggling in your younger life and going wayward, you turned your life around and you're now supporting and mobilizing others, which is brilliant. You studied at Spurgeon's, Theological College.
That's correct, yeah.
Which was a huge achievement, having started in 2015 with no academic qualifications and also illiterate. And one of the lecturers, apparently in your interview, said to another on the panel, "What are we going to do with this one?" I love that.
They didn't even go off to have that conversation. They had that right in front of me. It's like, I'm still here.
Yes. Hello. I'm in the room. And you're married to Stacey, and you've got 5 children and 2 big dogs, I just learned.
Correct.
Wonderful. So, hey, church leadership. I'd love to start by asking you how that's going. It's rare to get a self-identifying evangelist leading a church. It's normally teachers and pastors who pick up that mantle. So what's led to you leading at Albany Road?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd have asked me, I think if you'd have asked me even 2 years ago, Phil, where do I see myself? I think it would have been more in the, kind of the pioneering context. And first of all, let's just talk about the pioneering context, because a pioneering context kind of denotes that you're a trailblazer, that you're doing something new. Well, upon studying Baptist history at Spurgeon's, I realized that, what I thought I was doing new was what founders of denominations and founders of churches were doing 500 years ago. So there isn't, I think there needs to be some kind of dismantling around the word pioneering.
Yeah, people forget that all their churches were pioneered at some point, don't they?
Completely. So I never thought I would be in the role as pastor teacher, and so we left our last placement church where I studied during my time at Spurgeon's, where I was a minister in training, was with a Baptist Union project as a fitness church, which we'll come on to some more in a minute. And then we started looking out across the country. We started looking out. We got headhunted in certain ways and what have you. And we thought, we were going to continue to be in street ministry and prison ministry and what have you. But we've always been community focused. So we lived, the last 6 years, we lived in a little tiny village, like a little hamlet on the other side of Sevenoaks, a real sort of rural town. And everything that we speak about doing was what we naturally did in that village. We are, being incarnational, being fully relational, being a mediator in the neighborhood, being the, you don't want to say being the fixer, but it's a nice, I believe, rightful accolade when a local minister or a local Christian man is seen to as the one that the community goes to help fix problems. And most of that comes up from the school gates. So we started looking for different areas, and this church came up, and this church were looking for 4 areas. They were looking for community development, community links and engagement. They were looking at taking a church from where it is and moving it, so the traditionalism versus progressivism. And they were just kind of asking the question of, if our church doesn't change, it will die out. What does it look like for our church to meet the needs of a community? So actually, we've kind of figured, well, that's exactly who we are and what we do. So the hardest part of my week, Phil, is here on my desk with my admin, and kind of, I guess not, not hard, but taking care of the established flock that are used to a worship and word sandwich, that are used to that kind of area, because that's completely different. So but as I've said on air, and I said to the church, when we came and met the church back and forth, we gave them plenty of chances to say no, and we got 100% unanimous vote.
Well, that's really interesting to me. It's a marker of something that I was talking about in an earlier Resonate with Rich Robinson. Right. That churches have become, through the whole COVID experience, there's a lot more flexibility and fluidity in what they're looking for in terms of leadership and how they do church and how they run what they've got, how they transition what they've got into something more outward facing. So I'm very interested to see churches appointing evangelists and people like yourself, and looking for not just the stock in trade preacher who can so-called feed the flock week by week, but something which is a little bit more pioneering. And it sounds like Albany is a case in point. It's very good.
Yeah, exactly. And we use terminology there of feeding the flock like that's just some penned in people, that just need religiously pacifying and what have you, as where we've kind of come in straight away with more of the sort of vineyard approach of equipping the saints for acts of service. And actually I will feed that flock, but as a shepherd, and I want to stand behind, and as someone who is apostolic in my approach, they're the ones who I'm standing behind pushing. I'm not saying I'm going to go and work in the community, you lot follow me. No. I'm about mobilizing the folk that are already there.
Well, there we go. There's a whole introduction to the fivefold there in terms of what you just outlined. It is an equipping role, and you have picked up that mantle with that apostolic perspective, which is absolutely brilliant. So are you adjusting to the rhythms?
We are adjusting to the rhythms. For us as a family, Phil, we moved in over the summer, the hottest summer on record. And as a family, my oldest is coming up 22, my youngest is 1. My wife works term time with mental health specialists with young people. So it allowed us to adapt as a family. It allowed us to transition a geographical move as a family. So now I'd say only in the last 3 or 4 weeks, taking the Queen's passing out of that, which also was another dichotomy. I'd say we're only now kind of finding the rhythms of what we are. But I want to act in faithfulness and wisdom, but I want to act in maturity. And actually we intend to be here for the long haul. So I'm not going to change overtly. I think there will be change, but I'm not going to change rapidly anything for the first 12 months in ministry. So I have a full life cycle of the church's calendar. And I think what that does as well, Phil, is that gives an appreciated respect to their heritage and their lineage that if you come in too soon, and however good the ideas are, you perhaps devalue and dehumanize a settled community.
Yes, that's very pastoral. Now, I mean, you obviously have been listening to the voices that are around you, and the voice of the Spirit, just to not. I mean, I have seen people come in who are pioneers and try and overturn the tables, and it just has gone very badly, and it has led to people just digging their heels in and going back to older ways, because that's their security. And it's understandable in some respects.
Yeah.
So
And you know what? Some of those ideas were probably brilliant, but the timing and the execution of those ideas was not.
Yeah. So I think you're great. It's a great decision to go for evolution rather than revolution.
Yeah.
So I think that slow approach is probably the best one. So well done.
I imagine that also carries, that carries the collective with you. If I'm, the church has had some hurt. Let's just park that. But it's probably had 10, 15 years of hurt. So it's a church and a leadership that need to be loved on. So my wife and I, we're just going to eat with people. We're just going to encourage. We're going to speak words of life over each other. We've just done a teaching series on Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Language, on how we best serve the church and how best the church receives that and understands its way of differing gifts. And it's been a really, really encouraging series to preach on, and it's been hugely and gratefully received by the church as well.
Well done, mate. That's great. So tell me a little bit about your interest in fitness. Why fitness? What is it about the fitness aspect of life that attracts you? How did you get into that?
Gosh. So mental health has always been a part of my life as well. I mean, huge bouts of depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions as well. And for me, fitness has always been my primary medicine. Just a small statistic that it takes 20 minutes of your heart working at 65% of its capacity for your body to release dopamine, endorphin, cortisone, serotonin, those feel good chemicals, pretty much the identical chemicals that are made up in things like sertraline, clonazepam, citrapam. Although I'm not a physician, so by the way, if you're listening to this, I am not a registered physician. And if you're taking medication, please do carry on taking your medication. But for me, the route of medication, I've been there and what have you. So for me, the idea of fitness as a lifestyle, way before it came into ministry, has always been a very important inroad, a very important caveat. It started off in earlier life, competing in junior powerlifting competitions, other sort of weightlifting, and then probably 10 years ago, I discovered CultFit. I mean CrossFit. It's known as CultFit because of the way that actually its main ethos is about building the community.
Yes.
I'm like, hang on a minute, why is the fitness industry coming in to build community when we look at Acts 2 and we've been doing this for over 2,000 years? And I just saw a real partnership then between the Deuteronomic Shema, the oldest law in biblical history. You will love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, and all of your strength. That's emotional strength or physical strength. You interpret that as you wish. And actually, that perhaps there is a duality. There's a duality in worshiping God with more than just a spiritual response. And perhaps the church is a disservice if it doesn't take care of people's physical well-being and people's emotional well-being. So that was the start of that.
That's a terrifically empowering incarnational perspective. That's very powerful. So I do remember fairly early on in my leadership in a church, we had a dancer who would just help people to breathe at the beginning of worship and do little exercises to relax, to enter in, to worship physically.
Yeah.
And it was such a helpful exercise. I remember those times. But it's something which people have made a lot of separation between their bodies and their spirits, haven't they?
Yes.
It's an ongoing issue.
Now, if you look at my role and the DNA of myself as a fitness professional and as a sports coach, and you as a client, and what I would seek for you as a sports coach with a client, it is pretty much no different, Phil, than me as a pastor and you as one of my flock. It's a position of taking you from A to B through a systematic process.
Mm.
And the great thing I love about fitness within church as well, Phil, is it allows people to pilgrim. Something we don't do. Churches are pretty much non-participatory spectator sport, where it's pretty much set up like a junior school assembly, but for adults. We sit on chairs, we look at the front, so there's a bit of show and tell, there's a bit of singing, and then we all file out neatly in our neat little lines. So the idea of doing stuff that's progressive, that takes us from a point of being pilgrims and takes us to a further point in terms of it being a developmental area, means that, as you know, Phil, if you start disciplining and developing in one area of your life, be that spiritual, be that physical, or be that emotional, you can fine-tune that formulaic process into other areas of your life.
Yes, so it's very much a transferable discipline.
A transferable discipline.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's brilliant. Well, so what is it that you've seen happen through the fitness interests? Tell me a little bit of how that's worked out, Nat, in relation
it's been a fantastic inroad for a start. So each week, these are pre-COVID figures. Each week, just 2 million people now access church and attend church, which is the lowest number since the 1940s, where 25% of the population went to church. Well, we're now at 2%, less than 2% of the population, and that's pre-COVID. Yet 15 million people average sports and leisure facilities each week on a regular basis. So it seemed a very obvious agora, a very obvious marketplace to have a duality in that. So that was that was the inroad. And of course, if you're going to do something for the kingdom, if you're going to do something for God, then you make sure you do that with the rightful motive, due diligence, but you make sure you do that with also the right level of credence. So as part of our fitness church, every leader at the fitness church we were at in Ebbsfleet was trained in certain parts. So Run England has trained up sports coaches to do running groups and what have you.
So you called it a fitness church?
It was a fitness church. So the name of the church was Sunday Active. I'll give them some free marketing now. Sunday Active, and in small font underneath, because it was a Baptist pioneer project, Ebbsfleet Baptist Church. But that came in like size 12 font underneath Sunday Active. So it was
good.
it was built around the notion of fitness. So it had walking groups, gardening groups, running groups, and fitness groups. And here's the other thing, because if you didn't like PE, it didn't mean to say you weren't able to come to our church. It wasn't an elitist, you could only come to the church if you like fitness.
Well, that's a brilliantly relevant and innovative missional outreach, isn't it? That's very innovative thinking and adaptive thinking.
Absolutely. So Reverend Penny Marsh from the Baptist Union.
I know Penny.
So it's Penny's project. So I worked with Penny, and her husband there. So
Barry,
Penny and Barry. So just a wonderful initiative. And that was on a brand new housing estate. In fact, the church was planted when only 100 houses on the estate was built. It's just past its 3,000 house mark. There's going to be 11,000 homes between now and 2038. Wow. So the church was seeking to reach unchurched people. We're talking we're talking pre-alpha. You know, in our generation, Phil, we at least had some biblical understanding from schools and what have you growing up. As we're now, pretty much, I'm about to lead some Christmas services, and I've got to go in with the notion that the Coca-Cola lorry and Jesus Christ are the same thing to some people. That we're at that post-Christendom level of understanding. So how do you make inroads? And for us, the fitness was just simply an inroad.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. So you've seen it grow, and you've become someone that people are trekking to learn about this stuff now.
Because the last thing you want something like this to look like, Phil, is you do not want it to look kooky. But eventually you stop prattling about, grow up and do real church. You know, you do not ever want it to look kooky because you turn up in tracksuit and a trainers as opposed to a jacket and tie on a Sunday. You know, because it's about focal relationship and focal participation. So it isn't just relationship, it's participation with people. And you know, if you were to go for a walk with a perfect stranger, the fact that you're journeying with that person in a duality, in a focused duality, means that by the end of that, you're going to have a deeper relation than if you just sat next to Billy in a pew on a Sunday while you both observed the ceremonialism of what was happening.
Brilliant. So how do you make sure that you keep that a dual journey?
I think you make sure that your motives are always kingdom driven. Your motives are always kingdom driven. That's you're always seeking to offer the invitation. You know, people come to Jesus Christ because of an invitation. I'm sat here because someone gave me an invitation. You're sat there because someone gave you an invitation. So whatever you do it not with a secondary motive, but you do it with the intention that you're going to seek to offer the invitation to Jesus Christ. How you do that. So how we did that in the fitness church, let me just explain the model there, was we would pilgrim first. So we would run, we would walk, we would boot camp, CrossFit, drink coffee first. Then we would come in stinking and sweating, and we would eat together. We would have breakfast together. And then we would do
food. I knew food had to be involved somewhere.
Come on, food has to be involved in, you know. So now you know it's a church project if food's involved in there somewhere. Yes, food's involved. Now it's a credible church project. And then we would do a sermon type thing that we would simply call spiritual conditioning, because we'd already been out with people physical conditioning, so the language and the rhetoric and the narrative was already in an understanding. And we would go very light with YouTube heavy imagery, a little pause and thought for the day, simple biblical principles, teachings, with the assumption of no prior knowledge. People would stay for that. People were given the chance. People were given the choice there. They could come and exercise and do breakfast and then go, or they could come, exercise, do breakfast, and then simply be together to just hear a thought for the day. And 90% of people stayed for that thought for the day. And that's now what the church there, which has been a few years now, is started on. And people have started to come into membership. People have started to ask seeker questions. They're probably still pre-alpha stage. You know, they're probably still pre-alpha stage. But courses like Simply Christianity, which is a precursor alpha course, and that kind of thing have started.
Brilliant. Well, it's just looking after people's whole being, isn't it? Rather than focusing on trying to win them to a decision. And I think people recognize that integrity when people are involved in their whole well-being and not just one aspect.
That's it. I mean, you know, I came to church. Well, we're probably not too dissimilar in age, Phil, but in that whole Billy Graham era, you know, of the altar call at the front and then gone. And actually, you look back now and you think, well, I wonder where most of those people were, because it becomes the parable of the sower, doesn't it? I wonder where most of those people are now that were told, come forward, give your life to Jesus. Right, off you go then. Off you go to a church. But actually we recognize now that we can't disservice people that way, that if we're going to really be about relationship, I see my job as a community warden, as a community officer. I just happen to have a dog collar on.
That's great.
Primarily, my role is a community development worker, the same as any other secular organization would probably word their understanding of a community development worker. I just happen to do that in the name of Christ.
People ask me sometimes over the years what my job is, and I've made up a different job title depending on what they understand.
Gotcha.
It is it's quite important, I think, that people recognize your role in relation to what their normal daily lives look like. But that's very helpful. But you had an interesting early life, Nat. Should we go back a little bit in terms of the time frame and just ask what were some of the troubles that you kind of came through in your early youth?
Home life for me was extremely difficult as a young boy and into early childhood. And I want to be deeply respectful, as both my birth parents are still alive, and this is going to be recorded, so I'm always very careful of what I say, to honor thy father and honor thy mother. But was very, very troubled, and a lot of my childhood and early teenage years were spent living with aunts and uncles and in other parts. And I placed a value on myself at a very early age, Phil, of insignificant background. My sister was born after me with huge developmental issues. My birth mother has severe physical ailments, but very difficult mental health problems as well. She lost a son before me. I was given the name of their dead son. So from the minute I was born, I was never even given my own identity on earth. Wow. And I think my early developmental being, asked, who am I? Do I matter? Who am I? Do I matter? And I sought the approval and the validation of other people once I learned that at a sort of developing cognitive age, early teens into teenagers, into just desperately seeking attention and approval and belonging. And although I was not born inherently bad, that desire to be liked, that desire to want that took me through some crazy decisions at a very, very young teenage age, through experimental drugs, street robbery, car crime, burglary. I've slept in shop doorways as a teenager. I've witnessed people being stabbed. I've witnessed people being raped, and just horrendous things that a child should never ever have to see and witness. And the whole time, Phil, my young developed insecure being was just shouting out, somebody love me, somebody love me, somebody love me, somebody notice me. And I think that's a rhetoric that's followed me most of my life, because I got saved at a time 16 turning 17, and in Bristol, a large church. And this is, we're not too far from Soul Survivor in Bristol, there just down the road. And I began speaking at local churches and then larger events, because the last thing you want to give an insecure show off, Phil, is a microphone. An insecure show off who seeks the validation of other people. And Facebook know this as well. We get that little like button, because the approval of other people is it's like injecting pure dopamine into an unsatisfied soul. And I became very, very quickly a national youth evangelist who spoke at large events, your Soul Survivor, Spring Harvest. And I pretty much fabricated and lied in every pulpit I ever stood in until I was probably in my mid to late 30s, Phil. And I'm on marriage number 3. And I've had 2 breakdowns, one of which I was sectioned in 2005. I've had bankruptcy. I've been arrested from churches.
Wow.
I've been told that people, I've been told even in my ministerial formation that someone like you should not be in ministry in church car parks by good church folks. And actually going back and dealing with all of that, which is why I come on to another area in a minute with addiction and mental health, and why there's such a duality between our spiritual development, our emotional development, and our physical development. That as a pastor, evangelist, community development worker, I want to be a whole being. I don't like the word holistic. I think it has too many sort of nebulous sides. I think it's a little bit fluffy, rosy. I think it has a little bit too much Eastern mysticism connotations, even though it doesn't. So I tend not to use the word holistic because I don't think we have a rightful understanding in the Western context of the word holistic. So I use whole being.
Yes.
More of a word. And digress there a little, but those early childhood traumas, those unprocessed, unresolved childhood traumas took me through the decisions and terrible decisions of the first 20 years of my active ministry, Phil.
So what turned it all around, Nap? That it says that you things changed and that you began to see some of that child trauma healed.
I allowed for the first time ever, and I think and I want to be careful as well when I say this, but I think if you're in bouts of counselling, if you're in bouts of development, there's certain seasons in your life when you're ready to receive that. It's like you've heard a sermon 1,000 times, but one time you hear that sermon on that particular passage and you go, I get it now. The peneth has dropped.
That's very true.
And I think that's what it was for my emotional development, because of course all emotional well-being comes down from self-worth and self-validation, allowing fully to accept your value and the way that you're seen in the image of Christ, which I could preach about all day long, Phil, but I never believed it. I never fully believed it. In fact, I could probably preach an entire series on it, but I never knew that I knew until I allowed that to sink in. And here's a concept as well, which I'm going to speak to, which I'm sure people watching this will hear, and if they don't, please contact me. It's about making that relationship with your inner child again. So I revisited through therapy, through EMDR therapy, I revisited myself in the cot, and was able to pick up this baby in the cot and tell this baby that it had value and worth, and to never put that baby down. So to make a resolve with my inner child allowed the adult to grow. Because of course emotional underdevelopment, which is often seen as narcissistic behavior, is often praised in the world because of course it makes you militant and autocratic and it gets things done. Most leaders of the world, Donald Trump, are emotionally underdeveloped, hugely emotionally underdeveloped. And it took me a long while to make peace with myself. And I'd love to say I get it right every single day, but I don't. It's a work in process. Like our spirituality is a work in process, daily sanctification. Well, if you came to my gym once a year and you did 20 minutes on the treadmill, and at the end of the year you asked me why you weren't physically fitter,
yes,
it's the same way spiritually, it's the same way emotionally, it's the same way physically, which is why for me those three are never not intertwined.
Yes, very good. And that's the discipleship journey, isn't it? I mean, if Jesus calls us mathetes, disciples, which is learners, and if you stop learning, then you're stepping off the discipleship journey.
Yeah. As I say, I mean, John Mark Comer, who's one of my favorite teachers, they just, apprentices of the way.
Yes.
We understand the word apprenticeship in a Western context a lot greater than we understand the word discipleship, but it's the same word.
Yes. No, I do like his teaching. He emphasizes the word habits rather than disciplines, which I think disciplines sometimes has got a heavy connotation for some people.
But I'll tell you what, Phil, even going back 5 years, I wouldn't have been able to understand most of what John Mark was saying. I wouldn't have been able to absorb. I wouldn't have been able to resonate most of what was being said there.
Yeah. So things began to turn around, and you ended up going to Spurgeon's. What led you to that?
Ended up going to Spurgeon's. So yes, so second failed marriage, 2013. Second time in my life homeless, 37 years old, carrier bag homeless, reputation in tatters. Blah blah. I also then start suffering from psychological seizures, and lose my driving license at 2014 as well. Having daily seizures, just all to do with unprocessed trauma and suppressed pain. In the process of healing, around the time of getting well in 2000, back into 2014 and into 2015, I started getting well, and I had this notion: it's time to pick up the pen. But what on earth does this mean? I left school probably just after primary school education. I went to secondary school for some bits, but mainly because I was selling knockoff CDs and phone cards and selling drugs and what have you in the school, and I like the girls, but I basically finished my education at primary level. But I've always been smart. I'll look at a car registration once and can memorize it. You show me your credit card, I'll memorize that 16-digit number within seconds in a sequential way. So I've always had, so fraud for me was always a good way to soak up that brain gravy that I never used. So 2015, I just thought, why not? I was having conversations with people. I thought it's time to pick up the pen. And I've been in some horrendous situations. I was a licensed doorman for a while as well. I've worked with the criminal underworld. But Lecture Room 1 in Spurgeon's College was probably the most intimidating place I've ever been in my life. And I had 2 words: faithfulness and obedience. And I did not know I didn't start in 2015 thinking, right, I'm going to be blah, 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 blah. I'm going to, at the end of this, I'm going to go blah, 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 blah. I could barely read or write.
Wow.
Or write. But I've always had an incredible thirst for knowledge. I read books. I listen to audio books, listen to podcasts. I read Bible notes. And I pretty much, before Bible college, knew all the Bible in chronological order, was able to sort of picture things back and forth because I'd never soaked that up. And in fact, even in some of my earlier lectures, I was, the lecturers would say, like, listen, you could hold your own in a theological master's lecture, but you've got no ability to be able to write anything down. So it took me 7 years, Phil. I've got a diploma, a level 5 diploma in theology, and that took me 7 years to get. But I'm taking that as a doctorate compared to where I came from at an academic level. And in fact, I've just been ordained on September the 3rd and just been inducted as a minister. Wow. And one of my dear friends and lecturers came and took the service and what have you, and it was deeply honoring and deeply humbling to hear how Spurgeon's felt about me, not just how I felt about Spurgeon's, but how the impact that I had on the staff and my cohort of peers at Spurgeon's as well. So it's been a deeply
that's quite a remarkable story, Nat, to move from childhood trauma and illiteracy to be able to do those studies and to come through the other side. That's a remarkable achievement.
And I'll tell you where I would spend most of my self-training. Everything. I mean, I love Facebook. I didn't come to Facebook to kind of 2014, so I was late to the party. It was already 7 years old by then. So when just putting up a picture and writing your little statement, I would think about, where do the commas go? So that's basically where I dummied most days, learning my punctuation and my grammar. And actually most of my essays at Bible college were just marked on the context, and someone else put in all the grammatical bits and pieces, because I take a stab, like, every 5 words we put a comma in, what's full stop there, or so it's been a learning process. Even when I read in church, I still read with my thumb, with my finger underneath the word when I'm reading out in church. But you know what? God smiles. It's not important.
That's really good. It's wonderful. So you're now Baptist minister, and you have 5 children, is that right?
I have 5 children. Yes.
So
Yes.
what's life like with in leadership with 5 kids in the house? You're
And then
on
that say, yeah, this I'm on marriage number 3, so I've only 2 children in this marriage, but they're 4 and 1, which is what's the polite way? The interesting stage of life. The interesting stage of life, that actually now trying to find balance, and I think some are allowed a different balance because it was transition and it was school holidays, so it's now trying to find a balance and a rhythm in the school life, in the church life, in family life, and I'd say, you know, some days are better than others.
Yes.
Some days are better than others. I think that's the politest way without crying on camera.
Well, you've got quite an incredible tribe there, it sounds like, with all the children and the 2 Mastiff dogs. You were just saying you've got a new big dog. Where have you got that picture that you showed me earlier?
Let me bring it up. Let me bring that up because it should be the last thing I brought up.
Of your 1-year-old
This is my 1-year-old son, Jaden, and this is our 1-year-old puppy. So she's still got some more growing to do, Shelby. So she's a 1-year-old dog de Bordeaux puppy. There you go.
Wow, that's quite a handful.
That's quite a floor donk. We call them floor donkeys because they have their walk and they come and they lie on the floor and they just look like a floor donkey.
Yeah, but I was saying that my favorite car sticker was a big bull mastiff locked in the back of a car, and I looked at the car sticker on the window, and it was "Behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world."
There you go.
And this thing drooling at me through the window made me laugh.
Fabulous.
But you certainly must cut quite a figure if you're walking around with 2 big Mastiff dogs in your area.
Yeah, they come on the school run with us and they come down to cafe. You know, I spend most of my life down in the local cafe here. And you know what? I mean, here's another adage of God at work. I've been here 2 minutes. I've literally just lived here 2 minutes. And already I said to the local cafe leader, a guy called Muzz, I just said, look, Muzz, we want to come and do men's breakfast here at the church. We want to come in, and you know, and this is when you know God smiles, because he said this, anything for you, Rev?
Yeah.
I've been here 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Already had this kind of relationship as well. So yeah, I'm a community development worker who just happens to run a church.
Yeah, that's very good. I love that, because we run a cafe in our high street. We opened a cafe and we ran a school for a while. So I was viewed by the local businesses as a co-laborer in the high street.
Right. Yeah.
As another business owner, and I just loved that dual identity as a businessman and cafe owner, as well as the church leader. So yeah. I think dual vocations are something which are going to become much more a feature of the church leadership role going forward.
Yeah, but I think we're a long way off now, expecting people just to walk into our sanctuaries on a Sunday morning. I think, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I think we're a long way off that. And I think if we think like that and act like that, we're quite archaic in that. And you're absolutely right, Phil. You know, COVID was the blue touch paper for that. And of course, you know, some churches shut down during COVID and will never reopen their doors again. And that's the saddest truth about that. COVID also realized that you no longer have to get up and go somewhere on a Sunday morning. You can get up and open your iPad, or you can get up and put YouTube on your smart TV. So that's also changed the demographics. As a pastor, I'm looking at we stream online and have congregation in person. So as a facilitator, you're working out, well, how do I engage with the room and engage with this camera pointing in my face as well? So we're navigating new areas.
Massive change.
But if we don't
Sorry, carry on.
If we don't monopolize this opportunity and given, I wouldn't imagine there's been a greater opportunity given for the church than if there's anything to be thankful for what the pandemic left behind in its remnants. It's for us to must make key changes, and that doesn't make someone an apostolic. That makes someone just acting within due diligence, I think.
Yes, that scripture that there were men of Issachar who knew the times and seasons and knew what to do. I think that's one of my favorite scriptures. We need a lot more of those men and women in leadership in the church nowadays, just people who can discern the times. Rich Robinson used the term the great disruption to talk about the pandemic and certainly the things that are going on. I just wonder what the thing that's resonating for you in terms of cultural change at the moment and what God is up to.
Yeah, I mean, I came off a London City Mission Zoom last Friday, looking at our next approach. Of course, the cost of living is our new approach. I've got a 1-year-old son on his third prime minister as well now. And our whole uncertainty going into that most people before the pandemic, most people before gas and electricity hike prices were mobilized out of anxiety and fear. Whether you want to say that keeps the populace at bay, and but most people are. That actually now we as church leaders deal with vulnerability and rawness and function in addiction. I know we have perhaps time to touch on that today, but it's another huge demographic to work on as well, because of course addiction is no longer the tramp on the park bench drinking tenant super. It's no longer the smackhead sat outside of Boots. We've come a long way in understanding that. We know that cocaine goes into Canary Wharf by the wheelbarrow load, and a country's run on functioning addiction. That actually our message, and this is what resonates now, our eternal anchor, stronghold message of the unshakable God brings hope, because of course COVID also removed the rug for self-sufficient people. That's the hardest thing as a minister and as an evangelist to do. What need do self-sufficient people have for a savior? That actually that message now has come undone, because self-sufficiency isn't quite so self-sufficient anymore. We've almost lost the middle classes. They reckon now, Phil, that a 40 grand a year salary is a breadline salary.
Wow.
I mean, that blows your mind. That's now a breadline. That's a breadline salary. So you look at most people that surviving on universal credits, where we have civil servants and professional practitioners using food banks as part of our society. We've got churches now that are putting out flyers of where warm spaces are in the community. Wetherspoons has always been a community daycare centre, because you can get a coffee and a cake for $1.99 and fill your coffee up for as much as you want each day. The churches are going to get back to some of the early social care that they did at the end of the industrialized revolution, on the back end of the workhouses, where social services, where the Red Cross, where all those Butlins, where all those organizations came in. I believe the church are going to have to become forerunners again at social action. I believe that Food Bank has been one of the greatest inroads into that.
We are having to be service providers at so many levels, aren't we? And
Yes,
this is part and parcel of being the good news.
And it comes back again, Phil, to the rhetoric that I spoke this morning of this whole being care. William Booth said, give people some soup first, then give them some soap, and then give them the salvation. And that order wasn't by chance. That was the order, that was the rightful order. And when Jairus, his daughter, came back to life, Jesus didn't say, put this girl on an alpha course. No. He said, give this kid something to eat.
Yes.
That we have a social responsibility to show and demonstrate the love of God. That in fact, Phil, in my 10 years here, I want what I do on a Sunday morning to be the least important part of my week.
Amen. Yeah, that's well said.
Not least significant, but
Mm.
in some areas the least important part of what I do each week. And that's how I believe we build kingdom.
It's very good. I think the church is having to think and organize itself in a completely new way in this season. Do you think what is going on? Do you see people pioneering new ways of doing church?
Yeah, it does actually. And you know what? Whether that hand's been forced or whether the curvature of the landscape of where we are has forced that, it's given chances. It's given now chances to do that, because actually, what churches cannot do anymore is just continue with the we now live in pre and post, with the pre-pandemic status quo.
No. Well, Nat, it's been great to talk to you. Anything you want to share before you finish?
Oh gosh, no. I think we've covered so much, Phil, and we've touched on certain areas, but
Yeah.
I think just the area that I wasn't able to talk about, and that's say as a practitioner with addiction. And
maybe I can get you up and do a follow-up on this one.
let's do that.
Talk about that more.
Because that would easily take another whole hour to do that due service, because addiction is just as relevant as prevalent in the church.
Yes,
it is outside of the church, and that's the finishing note there for the continuum.
Great. Well, that's a great way to finish. We'll follow on with that. Thank you for your time, Nat, and God bless you in your leadership where you are. And we just pray that the family sees its way through half term well, that the dogs and the 1-year-olds continue to get on.
That's right. Yeah. One will eat one of them, as I see. Yeah. My money's on the baby winning.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, my friend, for your time, and we'll speak soon.
You're welcome.
God bless.